Title The Costliest Mistake. The announcement. The conference room smelled faintly of lemon polish and ambition. Rows of executives, analysts, and department heads lined the glass table that reflected the fluorescent lights overhead. The late morning sun filtered through Trellis Corporation's 42nd floor windows, casting sharp stripes of brightness against the gray carpet. Laura Mitchell adjusted the cuffs of her blazer, her fountain pen balanced neatly in her hand as she scanned the agenda on the table. She had been through hundreds of these meetings, but today something felt off. A charged silence buzzed just beneath the usual corporate chatter. People avoided her gaze. Papers shuffled. Coffee cups clicked too quickly against saucers. At the head of the table, CEO Evan Ross cleared his throat. His salt and pepper hair was slicked back, his navy suit impeccably tailored. Laura had once admired his composure, but lately she had begun to notice the cracks, the hurried glances at quarterly reports, the twitch of his jaw whenever her department's numbers outshone the others. "Let's begin," Evan said, voice smooth as glass, but a little too rehearsed. He flipped through his notes. Today marks a new chapter in Trellis Corporation's growth. Laura's brows narrowed. New chapter? He continued. For 12 years, Laura Mitchell has led our client relations division with dedication. Under her, we've landed significant accounts: Harper Tech, Patterson Healthcare, Clarion Investments. Her efforts have helped Trellis establish a strong reputation in the market. The words should have been a preamble to a promotion, perhaps even the recognition she deserved. But Laura caught it then, the careful distancing of has led. Past tense. Evan's voice dropped half a pitch. But as we expand, the board and I believe we need fresh energy, new ideas, and a different leadership style. Therefore, effective immediately, Jenna Clark will assume the role of head of client relations. The room fell into stunned silence. Jenna Clark, sitting 3 seats away, straightened like a spring uncoiled. She was 10 years Laura's junior, ambitious but untested, her sleek blonde hair and sharp heels more memorable than her client strategies. Jenna tried, and failed, to suppress the satisfied curve of her lips. Laura felt the blood drain from her face, but she forced her hand to remain still on the pen, her expression smooth, her breathing even. Years in corporate warfare had taught her one thing: never let them see you bleed. Around the table, executives exchanged wary glances. Some stared at their notepads, others at the windows. Valerie, Laura's longtime assistant, pressed her lips together tightly, her eyes glistening. Evan kept talking, words dripping like oil. "We thank Laura for her contributions and wish her the best in future endeavors." The dismissal was surgical, stripped of warmth. No celebration, no proper farewell. Just a clean cut, as if 12 years of sacrifice were a line item erased. Laura placed her pen gently on the table and stood. Every eye turned to her, waiting for a crack, for fury, for tears, for an outburst. Instead, she smoothed the lapel of her blazer and offered a measured smile. "Congratulations, Jenna," she said evenly. Her voice carried through the room, calm and steady. "I trust you'll take good care of the clients." Jenna nodded, her confidence swelling under the spotlight. Laura gathered her leather folder, her phone, her notebook, 3 simple items that had anchored years of her life. She walked toward the door with unhurried grace, heels clicking rhythmically against the polished floor. The sound was too deliberate, too final, like a gavel striking. Only when her hand touched the door handle did she pause. The room behind her felt like a theater frozen mid-scene. Without turning, she said, "Sometimes the costliest mistake a company can make is forgetting who built its foundation." And then she left. The elevator ride down to the lobby was silent except for the hum of machinery. Laura's reflection stared back at her in the mirrored wall, dark hair neatly pinned, eyes sharp and unyielding. Beneath her calm exterior, a storm brewed. Years of loyalty, late nights, and sacrifices, all dismissed with a single sentence. As the elevator doors slid open, Valerie hurried to catch up, clutching a folder to her chest. "Ms. Mitchell, Laura, I can't believe this," Valerie stammered, her voice shaking. "After everything you've done." Laura held up a hand. "Not here." Her tone was firm, but gentle. They walked across the marble lobby. The receptionist glanced up, startled, then quickly looked away. Outside, the city roared with traffic, indifferent to betrayals happening in glass towers. Only when they reached the quiet of the parking garage did Valerie speak again. "You don't deserve this. Everyone knows it should have been you running the company someday." Laura unlocked her car, placed her folder on the passenger seat, and finally let a sliver of truth escape. Her eyes darkened, her jaw set. "They think they've won," she said softly. "But this isn't the end, Valerie. Not by far." For the first time that day, a flicker of steel entered her voice. It wasn't rage, not yet. Rage burned too fast, too reckless. This was something colder, sharper, a vow forming piece by piece. Because Laura Mitchell never left unfinished business. And Evan Ross had just made the costliest mistake of his career. The aftermath. Laura's office had always been a sanctuary, orderly, efficient, alive with the quiet hum of success. Sunlight spilled across the polished mahogany desk, glinting against the framed awards and neatly stacked files. It was a space built by years of victories. Client contracts negotiated over midnight calls, strategies refined until dawn, crises managed before they erupted. Now it was being dismantled. Valerie moved silently, her hands trembling as she pulled books from the shelf and tucked them into a box. The diplomas and certifications came down next, their frames clinking softly. Each sound felt like a funeral bell. Laura remained at her desk, methodically sliding papers into folders. Her movements were deliberate, not rushed. There was dignity in precision, even when stripped of power. She refused to let Evan or anyone else picture her broken. "Do you want me to cancel your meetings for next week?" Valerie asked, voice tight. Laura gave a small, humorless laugh. "I think they're already canceled for me." Valerie froze, then set the book she was holding onto the pile with more force than necessary. "It's not fair. You built this place. Every major client that matters came here because of you. And Evan just tossed you aside like some intern who couldn't keep up." Laura looked up, her gaze steady. "Fairness doesn't exist in boardrooms, Valerie. Only power, leverage, and perception. Evan thinks Jenna can give him those. He'll learn." Valerie sank into the chair opposite the desk, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was younger, only in her 30s, still believing hard work should be enough. Laura remembered being that way once, before she'd learned the truth. "You're not going to just walk away, are you?" Valerie asked carefully. Laura paused, her pen hovering over a notepad. She thought of the clients she had fought for, of the late nights when her daughter had gone to bed without her, of the moments she had traded personal peace for Trellis's profit margins. She thought of the board clapping Jenna on the back while looking away from her. Her jaw clenched. "No," she said softly, each word deliberate. "I don't intend to just walk away." By late afternoon, the office looked bare, stripped of personality. The walls were naked, the desk empty. Only the faint indentation on the carpet where her chair had sat all these years remained, a ghostly reminder that she had once belonged here. Valerie taped the last box shut and straightened. "Where should I send these?" "Home." Laura studied the boxes. They contained her career, condensed into cardboard and tape. But they also contained proof. Her work, her records, her history. She nodded. "Yes. Home for now." As they carried the boxes to the service elevator, employees glanced discreetly from their cubicles. Some looked guilty, others fearful. A few offered sympathetic smiles. Not one dared to speak. At the loading bay, Valerie set down her box and turned to Laura. "I can't stay here. Not after this." Laura raised an eyebrow. "You need a job, Valerie. Don't let loyalty cost you your livelihood." But Valerie shook her head with rare defiance. "You taught me that loyalty isn't about staying where you're tolerated. It's about standing with those who deserve it. You deserve better. And if you're going somewhere, I'm going with you." Laura studied her assistant's determined expression. Warmth flickered beneath the ice in her chest. In the bleakness of betrayal, loyalty was a rare fire. "Then stay ready," Laura said. I don't know where this path leads yet, but when it does, I'll call. Valerie nodded firmly, as if they had just signed a contract, without ink. That night, Laura sat in her study at home, the city lights flickering beyond the tall windows. The boxes from her office were stacked neatly along the wall, silent witnesses to her downfall. She poured herself a glass of wine and opened her laptop. Spreadsheets, client lists, performance reports, each file a reminder that her value hadn't evaporated with Evan's words. The numbers didn't lie. Harpertech, 27% growth under my lead. Patterson Healthcare, largest deal in Trellis history. Clarion Investments, renewed twice, only because I kept them. Her reputation wasn't built on Evan's approval. It was built on results, and results spoke louder than corporate politics. She closed the laptop and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Her phone buzzed with messages, colleagues expressing disbelief, friends offering sympathy. She ignored them all. Sympathy was useless. Disbelief didn't pay dividends. What she needed was clarity. And clarity came in a single realization. Trellis had taken her title, but they hadn't taken her clients. Clients didn't stay for logos or CEOs. They stayed for trust, for competence, for her. Laura swirled her wine and let a slow smile touch her lips. They think I'm finished, but they've forgotten something crucial. I built the foundation, and if I choose, I can take it with me. The first spark of revenge glowed in the ashes of her dismissal. The next morning, Valerie arrived at Laura's townhouse with fresh coffee and an eager look. Laura was already at the dining table, papers spread before her. I've been thinking, Laura began, about what Evan said. Fresh energy, new ideas, different leadership style. Valerie frowned. He meant Jenna. No, Laura's eyes gleamed. He meant weakness. He doesn't know it yet, but he just advertised to every client that Trellis is unstable. And clients hate instability. Valerie leaned forward, excitement dawning. So we show them stability. You. Laura nodded slowly. Not yet. Not openly. First, we watch. We wait. And when the cracks appear, we'll be ready to offer them something better. The plan wasn't complete, but the seed was planted. The betrayal still burned, but now it had shape, direction. Laura Mitchell would not be erased. Trellis had underestimated her. And soon, they would learn the cost. The spark. 3 weeks had passed since the announcement. Laura had settled into a strange rhythm. Early mornings spent at her dining table surrounded by papers, afternoons walking through the park to clear her head, evenings with her laptop glowing like a battlefield map. Outwardly, she appeared calm, even detached. But beneath the quiet, every nerve in her body was strung tight with purpose. Trellis, meanwhile, moved on without her. Or at least, they tried. Industry newsletters buzzed with Evan's bold decision to inject new leadership. Articles parroted the press release, praising Jenna Clark's innovative vision. But Laura knew the industry too well. Behind every headline, whispers thrummed. Clients asked questions. Competitors raised eyebrows. Markets waited for proof. Proof that Jenna Clark didn't have. On a drizzly Thursday afternoon, Laura's phone buzzed. Unknown number. She considered ignoring it, but instinct made her swipe. Laura Mitchell, a warm male voice asked. Yes. This is Harold Bennett, Patterson Healthcare. Laura straightened in her chair, her mind sharpening. Patterson Healthcare was her crown jewel, a billion-dollar account she had courted, nurtured, and defended for nearly a decade. Evan had called it untouchable, a phrase Laura never trusted. Harold, she said smoothly, as though she were still at Trellis. How are you? A pause, then a sigh. I'll be honest. Not good. We've had 3 calls with Jenna in the past 2 weeks. She doesn't know our history. She's making suggestions that ignore years of strategy. Yesterday, she called one of our compliance officers by the wrong name twice. My team is worried. Laura leaned back, cradling the phone to her ear. A thrill pulsed through her veins, but her voice stayed even. Transitions can be bumpy, she said carefully. Bumpy is one thing, Harold replied. This feels like incompetence. Laura, you built our trust. You understand our needs. With you gone, we don't know if Trellis still does. He stopped as if choosing his next words. Then, lower. If you weren't available, I'd rather deal with you directly. Has anyone snapped you up yet? Laura's heart quickened. There it was, the crack in Trellis's armor. But she had to play this perfectly. I haven't made any decisions yet, she said slowly. But I appreciate you reaching out. Decisions? Harold pressed. Laura, Patterson is a billion-dollar account. If you were to shift elsewhere, I can't speak for the board yet, but I'd push strongly that we follow. His words landed like thunder. Follow. A client that size wasn't just a loss, it was a death sentence for Trellis. Laura allowed herself a small smile. Understood. Let's stay in touch. When she hung up, she didn't move for a long moment. The city outside blurred in the rain, but in her mind, everything was crystal clear. This was the moment she had been waiting for. That evening, Valerie sat across from her at the kitchen table, scrolling through emails. You were right, she said, excitement lighting her face. Harper Tech just complained on LinkedIn about Trellis's strategic confusion. That never would have happened under you. Laura tapped her pen against her notebook, where she had written one name, Gregory Wilson. Valerie glanced at it. Meridian? Laura nodded. Gregory Wilson, CEO of Meridian Global, had been trying to poach her for years. She had always turned him down, unwilling to betray Trellis. Loyalty had been her anchor. But loyalty had been severed the day Evan cut her loose. Meridian has resources Trellis doesn't, Laura said softly. They move faster, think bigger. Gregory told me once he'd give me autonomy if I ever joined. Equity too. Valerie's eyes widened. And with Patterson, Laura finished, I'd walk in with leverage that Evan can't touch. For the first time in weeks, she felt the spark of exhilaration. Not just revenge, possibility. Laura drafted an email that night, short and sharp. Gregory, you once asked me what it would take for me to join Meridian. I think I'm ready to talk. LM. Her finger hovered over the send button. For years, she had kept Gregory at arm's length. Now, sending this felt like stepping off a cliff. But it wasn't fear she felt. It was liberation. She hit send. The spark had been lit. And soon, Trellis would burn. The offer. Gregory Wilson's office was nothing like Evan Ross's, where Evan surrounded himself with mahogany desks, oil paintings, and a view that screamed old money. Gregory's corner office at Meridian Global was all glass and steel. The walls glowed with interactive screens cycling through live market data. The skyline of Manhattan stretched endlessly beyond, towers of ambition piercing the clouds. It wasn't a throne room. It was a command center. Laura sat across from him, back straight, her navy suit impeccable. She had chosen her attire with care, professional enough to project authority, understated enough not to look like she was begging for a role. Her leather portfolio rested on her lap, a shield of composure. Gregory leaned back in his chair, studying her with a sharp smile. His salt and pepper beard was trimmed close, his gray eyes alert with curiosity. Well, he said, voice warm but edged with amusement, I never thought I'd see the day. Laura met his gaze evenly. Circumstances change. They do, Gregory agreed. He folded his hands, fingers steepled. I heard about Evan's decision. Brutal. But then again, Trellis has always been better at politics than vision. Laura allowed herself a small, controlled smile. You're not wrong. Gregory leaned forward. Tell me, Laura, why now? I've asked you for years. What makes you walk into my office today? She didn't hesitate. Because I finally have nothing left to lose. And everything to gain. The words hung in the air like a contract waiting for signatures. Gregory chuckled softly, then gestured toward the skyline. Meridian isn't Trellis. We move faster, think bigger. You've seen our acquisitions. We're building something global, not just safe. You'd fit here if you're ready to play at that scale. I built Trellis's most profitable division from the ground up, Laura replied. My accounts alone carried nearly a third of their revenue last year. You know what I can do." "Yes," Gregory said, his eyes sharpening. "That's why I want specifics. If I bring you in, what do you bring me besides a resume?" Laura opened her portfolio, sliding a slim folder across the desk. Gregory flipped it open. Inside were performance charts, growth analyses, retention rates.
Clean.
Precise. Unarguable. And on the last page, a list of names. Patterson Healthcare, Harper Tech, Clarion Investments. Gregory's brows rose slightly. "You think you can bring them?" "I don't think," Laura corrected. "I know. Patterson called me directly last week. They're unhappy with Jenna Clark. Harper Tech is already grumbling on social media. Clarion has been loyal to me personally for years. If I move, they'll follow." Gregory's smile widened. "That's not leverage, Laura. That's artillery." For a moment, silence filled the glass room, punctuated only by the hum of the data screens. Then Gregory closed the folder and tapped it with one hand. "Here's my offer. Head of Global Client Strategy. Full autonomy. Build your team your way. Equity stake in Meridian. We're not Trellis. We reward loyalty. You'll report directly to me, not the board. And if Patterson comes with you?" He spread his hands. "You won't just have a seat at the table. You'll own part of the table." Laura's pulse quickened. It was everything Trellis had denied her for years.
Autonomy. Equity.
Respect. But she kept her voice steady. "And what happens when Evan finds out? You know he'll come after me." Gregory smirked. "Then let him. Trellis is bleeding already. You'll just open the wound." Later, as Laura left Meridian's headquarters, the city air felt different, charged, alive. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets slick and shining like mirrors. She walked briskly, heels clicking, her reflection following her in every puddle. Valerie was waiting at a cafe across the street. She jumped up as soon as Laura entered. Well, Laura sat, peeled off her gloves, and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. He offered everything. Title.
Equity. Autonomy.
He wants me to build a team from scratch. Valerie's eyes lit up. That's incredible. It's war, Laura said softly, stirring her coffee. And wars aren't won with speeches. They're won with armies. Valerie leaned forward eagerly. Then we start building one. The next week was a blur of quiet moves. Laura began reaching out to trusted allies, people who had worked under her at Trellis and still carried scars from corporate betrayal. Some were hesitant, afraid to burn bridges. But others, like Valerie, were ready the moment she called. By Friday, she had secured commitments from 4 top performers, analysts, negotiators, and a senior strategist who had once followed her into a storm of client demands without complaint. "We're with you," they told her, voices steady. Laura felt the weight of loyalty settle around her shoulders, not as a burden, but as armor. She wasn't alone anymore. Meanwhile, Trellis was already wobbling. Jenna Clark bungled a Harper Tech presentation, misquoting figures that Laura had once recited flawlessly from memory. Harper Tech executives left the room visibly unimpressed. Word spread quickly, competitors sniffed opportunity, analysts whispered doubts. And Patterson Healthcare? They were done waiting. Harold Bennett called again, frustration thick in his voice. "Laura, it's worse than I thought. Jenna's missing details we covered years ago. She's suggesting solutions we already tried and failed. I can't keep wasting time. If you're with another firm, say the word. We'll follow." Laura's heart beat like a war drum. She spoke calmly, but every syllable was a blade. "Harold, I'll be making an announcement soon. When I do, you'll know where to find me." That night, Laura stood at her apartment window, the city glittering below like a field of stars. She pressed one hand against the glass, her reflection staring back, composed, resolute, dangerous. Evan had thought he ended her, but all he had done was free her. The offer was on the table, the team was forming, and the clients were already knocking. This wasn't just revenge anymore. It was empire building. And Laura Mitchell had never built anything small. The exodus. The first defection came quietly, almost politely. Patterson Healthcare signed the transfer documents on a Tuesday morning, moving their billion-dollar account from Trellis Corporation to Meridian Global. No press release, no drama, just a clean line drawn through Trellis's heart. Laura read the confirmation email at 6:43 a.m. while sipping her coffee in Meridian's executive lounge. The message was short and formal, but the meaning was seismic. Evan Ross's untouchable account was now hers. She set her cup down slowly, savoring the moment. A win like this didn't need fireworks. It needed silence, the kind of silence that meant an empire had just shifted. Valerie burst through the door a moment later, clutching her phone. It's done. Patterson's officially ours. Laura allowed herself the smallest smile.
Good.
That's one. By the end of the week, Harper Tech followed. Jenna Clark's disastrous handling of their concerns had been the final straw. She'd presented a flashy but shallow innovation strategy that recycled outdated metrics, failing to recognize Harper Tech's current expansion into biotech. The executives left unimpressed, muttering about Trellis losing its edge. 2 days later, Laura walked into a Meridian conference room where Harper Tech's leadership was waiting. She spoke for 40 minutes without notes, reciting market data from memory, weaving in insights only someone who had lived their history could know. When she finished, the CEO leaned back and said simply, "This is what we've been missing. Sign the deal." Another contract fell. Another billion-dollar account gone from Trellis's hands. Jenna tried to downplay it at first. In an internal meeting, she laughed nervously and said, "Clients move all the time. We'll replace them." But executives exchanged uneasy glances. Patterson and Harper Tech weren't just clients. They were pillars, the kind of accounts that gave investors confidence. And they hadn't just moved. They defected to the same place. To Laura. Rumors spread like wildfire across the industry. Laura Mitchell, once betrayed, was rebuilding stronger than ever. She wasn't just surviving. She was stealing Trellis's crown jewels one by one. Meanwhile, Laura's new team at Meridian was thriving. The office Gregory had given her was sleek and modern, with floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over the skyline. But Laura rarely sat behind her desk. She was in the trenches with her people, reviewing client portfolios, mapping strategies, rehearsing presentations late into the night. Valerie ran operations like a general, ensuring every meeting flowed seamlessly. Thomas, a strategist Laura had recruited from Trellis, handled analytics with surgical precision. Two young negotiators, Carla and Marcus, brought fresh energy, absorbing Laura's lessons like disciples. They weren't just a team. They were loyalists, bonded by the sting of betrayal and the thrill of revenge. At 11 p.m. one evening, as they huddled over takeout containers and spreadsheets, Valerie leaned back in her chair. "We've taken Patterson. Harper Tech. Clarion's already sniffing around. Evan has to be panicking." Laura didn't look up from her notes.
Good.
Let him. Inside Trellis, panic was an understatement. Board meetings grew tense, with directors demanding answers Evan didn't have. Revenue projections plummeted. Analysts downgraded the company's stock. Employees whispered in hallways, wondering if their paychecks would survive the quarter. And Jenna? She floundered. Every presentation exposed her lack of depth. Every client call revealed another mistake. She began avoiding her own team, her once confident posture shrinking into defensiveness. When Clarion Investments officially defected to Meridian 2 weeks later, Trellis's boardroom erupted. "How many more can we afford to lose?" one director shouted. "This is catastrophic," another snapped. Evans slammed his fist on the table. "We will recover. We will replace them." But no one believed him anymore. At Meridian, momentum built like a tidal wave. Laura's division was exploding, 3 major accounts secured, dozens of smaller ones lining up. Industry magazines ran features titled Laura Mitchell's Comeback and How Meridian Outmaneuvered Trellis. Gregory called her into his office one morning, grinning like a man who had just won a war. "Do you realize what you've done in 6 weeks? You've added $15 million in revenue to Meridian. 15 million, Laura. That's not growth. That's conquest." Laura kept her expression composed, but inside, the satisfaction burned bright. And we're only getting started. Gregory leaned forward, lowering his voice. Do you want to know the best part? Evan called me yesterday. Laura arched an eyebrow. Did he now? Oh yes. Begging me not to poach any more of his accounts. I told him Meridian doesn't poach. We simply welcome clients who want better leadership. Gregory laughed. You should have heard the silence on the other end. Laura allowed herself a small chuckle. Poetic. That night, as she walked home through the city, Laura reflected on how quickly the tide had turned. 3 months ago, she had left Trellis humiliated, her career packed into cardboard boxes. Evan had looked her in the eye and declared she was replaceable. Now, Trellis was crumbling, and she hadn't screamed or threatened or lashed out. She had simply done what she had always done, delivered results. Only this time, those results came at Trellis's expense. Revenge, she thought, watching the city lights flicker, is best served with a contract and a signature. By the end of the quarter, Trellis's revenue reports told the full story. $15 million in contracts lost. 3 flagship clients gone. Stock price down 22%. Meanwhile, Meridian reported record growth. And at the center of it all stood Laura Mitchell, calm, steady, and sharper than ever. She wasn't just proving Evan wrong. She was erasing him. Evan's fall. The numbers couldn't be ignored anymore. By mid-quarter, Trellis had lost nearly a third of its top-tier clients. Investors were pulling out. Analysts described the company's decline as free fall. Once, Trellis's name had commanded respect in every boardroom. Now it was whispered with pity, even mockery. The stock ticker was a slow bleed, each red arrow carving another wound into Evan Ross's pride. And the worst part? Every headline carried the same name. Laura Mitchell. The board meeting that Friday was bloodletting. Directors sat in a cold semicircle, faces grim. Evan stood at the head of the table, tie loosened, his jaw tight. For the first time in years, he looked less like a titan and more like a man fighting not to drown. Patterson. Harper Tech. Clarion. 3 in 6 weeks. One director said sharply. Do you know how that looks to the market? They were restless accounts. Evan snapped. We can replace them. Replace them? Another scoffed. Do you hear yourself? These aren't coffee suppliers. They're billion-dollar pillars. And they didn't just leave, Evan. They left for her. The word her hung in the air like a curse. Jenna shifted uncomfortably in her chair. She'd been summoned to defend her strategies, but the sight of her hunched posture and nervous fiddling with her pen only inflamed the board's fury. Miss Clark, a director said icily, perhaps you can explain why Harper Tech described your last proposal as, and I quote, embarrassingly outdated. Jenna's cheeks flushed crimson. That was taken out of context. Enough? Evan cut in, his voice low and dangerous. You're not helping. By the meeting's end, the verdict was clear. Trellis was bleeding, and Evan's leadership was under fire. We expect a recovery plan within 30 days, the chairman said coldly. If the numbers don't turn, Evan will have no choice but to reconsider your position. Evan's jaw clenched so hard it ached. You'll have it. But when the room cleared, leaving only Evan and Jenna, the silence was suffocating. This is your fault, he hissed. Jenna flinched. My fault? You're the one who insisted I take over Laura's accounts. You promised. I promised because I believed you could handle it. Evan slammed a hand on the table. But you've done nothing but embarrass me. Her eyes glistened, anger and humiliation twisting together. Maybe because you set me up to fail. I was never Laura. You knew that. The admission hung between them. And for the first time, Jenna seemed to realize that being Evan's replacement choice had never been about her talent. It had been about his pride. The cracks in their alliance widened quickly. Jenna began snapping at staff, avoiding calls, making excuses. She was late to meetings, her confidence evaporating under constant scrutiny. One disastrous pitch to a potential client sealed her fate. She stumbled through the slides, contradicted herself twice, and left the room in stunned silence. That afternoon, Evan called her into his office. "You're done," he said flatly. Jenna stared, eyes wide. "You can't fire me. Not after. Watch me." He didn't even look at her as he signed the termination papers. The betrayal was swift, cold, and eerily familiar. As she walked out clutching her box of belongings, staff avoided her gaze. A few whispered, just like Laura. History repeating itself, but this time, there was no comeback for Jenna Clark. Alone in his office that night, Evan poured himself a drink and stared out at the city skyline. Trellis's empire was shrinking beneath him. His so-called protégé was gone. His board was sharpening knives. And Laura Mitchell, the woman he had dismissed as replaceable, was dominating the industry with every move. He thought of calling her. The idea clawed at him. Maybe, just maybe, he could appeal to her professionalism. Offer her a deal. Promise her anything to stop the bleeding. At 1 a.m., glass of whiskey in hand, he finally dialed her number. It rang once.
Twice.
Then connected. "Laura Mitchell," came her calm, steady voice. For a moment, Evan couldn't speak. Then, quietly, "Laura, we need to talk." Laura was standing in her apartment, city lights glowing behind her. She listened in silence, her expression unreadable as Evan laid out his plea, words she had once longed to hear. "Come back," he said finally. "We can rebuild this together. I'll give you anything. Title, authority, equity. Just stop." There it was, the king on his knees. Laura closed her eyes briefly, remembering the sting of that boardroom dismissal, the sound of cardboard boxes being filled, the coldness of his voice when he had told her she was finished. When she spoke, her tone was calm, almost gentle. "No, Evan. That door closed the day you underestimated me." "Laura, please." "You taught me one lesson I'll never forget," she interrupted. "That loyalty means nothing to you. But you also taught me something else." "What's that?" His voice cracked. "That I don't need Trellis to win. I never did." And with that, she hung up. Evan stood in the dark, phone still pressed to his ear, whiskey burning in his throat. For the first time in decades, he realized he had no power left. By the end of the month, the board acted. Evan Ross, once the invincible titan of Trellis Corporation, was forced to resign. Headlines screamed his downfall, analysts dissected his arrogance, and the industry crowned a new name in his place. Laura Mitchell, Meridian's rising star. The day the news broke, Laura was already 3 meetings deep. Trellis Corporation's board had formally accepted Evan Ross's resignation. Industry outlets called it the end of an era and a cautionary tale in hubris. Stock prices nosedived, wiping out billions in shareholder value. Employees fled en masse, many of them applying to Meridian, where Laura was quietly building a new empire. To the outside world, Evan's downfall was a headline. To Laura, it was closure. That afternoon, she stood before Meridian's entire executive team. The conference room buzzed with anticipation. They knew the news, but they were waiting to hear it from her lips. Laura's voice was steady, clear. Trellis once believed no one was irreplaceable. Today, they learned the cost of that arrogance. "We will not make the same mistake." Applause thundered through the room. For the first time, Laura allowed herself a genuine smile, not the sharp-edged smirk of revenge, but a softer curve of satisfaction. She had not only survived, she had reshaped the battlefield. Meanwhile, in a penthouse that suddenly felt too big, Evan Ross sat alone. The empire he had built brick by brick was gone. Investors who once begged for his attention no longer answered his calls. The protégés who had once worshipped him now whispered his name as a warning. On his desk lay a single framed photo, him and Laura, taken years ago at Trellis's holiday gala. She was laughing in that picture, her arm linked with his, both of them symbols of a company at its peak. He turned the photo face down. The costliest mistake, he thought bitterly, wasn't losing clients or money. It was losing her. Weeks later, at Meridian's annual gala, Laura stood on stage accepting an award for Industry Leader of the Year. The ballroom glittered with chandeliers and applause. Cameras flashed. She looked out over the crowd, her team, her allies, her new family, and spoke words that felt both like victory and warning. Success is never about titles or corner offices. It's about respect. Take that for granted, and you lose everything. Valerie, standing in the front row, caught her eye and nodded. The message was clear. The night ended with laughter, music, and clinking glasses. But for Laura, the sweetest sound wasn't applause. It was silence, the silence of knowing that Evan Ross could no longer touch her. In the months that followed, Trellis was dismantled piece by piece, absorbed by competitors like vultures picking at a carcass. Evan vanished from the public eye, a fallen titan with no throne left to claim. Meridian, on the other hand, soared to record-breaking success, its growth tied forever to Laura's leadership. She became not just a survivor of betrayal, but the symbol of resilience. Her revenge was complete. Not through rage, not through scandal, but through excellence. White heavy checkmark, the end.